It's Monday, the 28th of June. Lifting lockdown, early easing of restrictions expected to be ruled out as the new Health Secretary preps for his first big day in the new job, something we may have seen coming. Would you answer the call if your Prime Minister wanted you in Cabinet again?
No, I'm not going to speculate about that. That's
a yes then, isn't it? Country of concern as Germany looks to ban all British holidaymakers from the EU. Portugal imposes a 2-week quarantine for UK tourists who haven't had 2 jabs. Military top brass in isolation, including 6 top commanders and the Defence Secretary.
Was there a sinkhole under that first building, sir? I just want to know.
Ma'am, we're the fire department, we're first responders, we have no idea.
Searching for answers, families question authorities as the search for survivors at a collapsed Miami apartment block continues. And Covid alert at Wimbledon forces British #1 Johanna Konta to withdraw from the competition. We're live at the club as the Grand Slam gets underway.
Heavy rain and thunderstorms for southern parts of the country today. Sunshine in the north. All the weather details coming up later.
Good morning, everybody. He's only been in the job a little over 24 hours, but the new Health Secretary has his first big test today when he updates MPs in the Commons on plans to ease Covid restrictions. He said he's keen to get back to normal as soon as possible, but the Prime Minister is expected to rule out unlocking further before the 19th of July at the earliest. Questions too this morning about the man who came before him and who leaked the footage of Matt Hancock. Our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates reports.
First day proper for the new Health Secretary and thrown straight into the 2-week unlocking review over whether to get rid of remaining restrictions.
We are still in a pandemic and I want to see that come to an end as soon as possible, and that will be my most immediate priority.
On the ground in the new Health Secretary's constituency of Bromsgrove, southwest of Birmingham, people here want him to move forward with the right balance when it comes to unlocking decisions and future restrictions. Could his economic background as a former Chancellor make a difference?
He might be less cautious, might be thinking more about the economy, but you've got to hope he's got an eye on the good nature of the country, really.
I hope that he's more straight with us, and because people are very confused, because even I'm confused, and I work for the NHS.
I don't want any more lockdowns to happen. That's the only thing I'm worried about. But I think they do a really good job.
Senior Conservatives on his own backbenches feel the same.
I hope now this time Sajid Javid, with a fresh mind on this, will come to this and look at the evidence. If we really are following the evidence, the truth is, yes, there's an infection rate, but the truth is it's hospitalisation and deaths which are critical. And I think the evidence is pointing clearly to the fact that we've broken the link with hospitalisation and death.
Sajid Javid set expectations sky high amongst MPs and the public yesterday when he said that his immediate priority was to get life back to normal as soon as possible. And as Health Secretary, he'll have power over face coverings, restrictions, foreign holidays. But with case numbers up 60% week on week, would he really end up being that different to his predecessor?
The opposition still want to talk about this, his predecessor. The infamous picture from Friday's Sun appears to have come from Cctv in his own office. But is it fair game for ministers to be filmed?
There is an issue as to how that got leaked, because that is a security issue in its own right. But I think the public would know and expect, most people would see that CCTV is there and it's there for a reason.
A fixture of our lives for the last 16 months, about to disappear from view. Could it nudge Britain onto a faster path out of restrictions? Sam Coates, Sky News.
Delighted to say the Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland, is with us now. It's always a pleasure, Mr Buckland. Thank you for joining us this morning. Why do you think that Sajid Javid will make a good Health Secretary?
Well, I think Sajid brings a wealth of experience from other government departments. He's, shall we say, a bit of a political veteran. And I think that he brings a fresh perspective as well to these vitally important issues. I have every confidence that he will start to work and get to grips with these important issues. He's got to look at some major matters today with the government, and I look forward to hearing his statement to the Commons.
With Matt Hancock, why did Boris Johnson say the matter was closed? I mean, how out of touch with the mood of the nation was that?
Well, look, I think there was a swirl of things going on here. There were, of course, the private matters, the private life matters. And indeed, as the hours went by, it was clear that there was, I think, an understandable groundswell of concern about how important it is that those who set the rules keep to them. And I think that when we look back at this, we will see that it took a day or so, but the right outcome was achieved, and it was correct for Matt Hancock to resign.
Why did the Prime Minister react before he knew all the facts then?
Well, look, I don't precisely know what was said between them, but what I do know is that Matt Hancock had worked tirelessly for the past 18 months or so, and indeed longer as Health Secretary. It's always difficult to lose somebody with such experience. Let's face it, we have been through this long road. On this long road, there is an absolute logic in trying to make sure that we have continuity and that the person who was involved in this from the beginning stayed to the end of it. But I think the circumstances became overwhelmingly clear that credibility was at stake, and that is why Mr. Hancock resigned.
Just because he's resigned doesn't mean we shouldn't have answers. Labour has called for the release of all documents related to Gina Coladangelo's employment at the Department of Health. Would you back that?
Well, look, I think that if there are any issues to be explored, then the Cabinet Office, which is ultimately responsible for all appointments, would be able to assist. I think there are a range of issues here that are being raised. Everything that I understand so far leads me to believe that due process was followed in the appointment of this person, and that any declarations that should have been made were made. But ultimately, it's a matter for the Cabinet Office, who oversee public appointments.
So you agree that there should be an investigation?
Well, as I said, what I have information that suggests that due process was followed, and I have no reason to doubt or dispute that. Public appointments have to be evidenced very carefully. It's not just somebody picking up the phone on a whim. It has to be done properly, and I would expect that in this case, like in every other case, due process was followed.
So what information do you have about when they started their relationship, given that she was employed by the Department of Health last September? We have to believe that they weren't in a relationship then, otherwise it would be against the rules. Some of the morning's papers are suggesting that there were rumours about their relationship some 2 years ago. You're confident that their relationship only started in May?
Well, okay, I don't know. I mean,
well, you said that you did know, so that's why I'm asking you, Mr. Buckland. You said you don't think that any rules have been broken, so I'm asking you to underline why you think that is.
What I said was that I'm confident the due process was followed and that declarations were made. As to when the relationship began, I'm afraid I don't know. But these processes aren't, as I say, the whim of one person. They have to be checked and double checked by others who know the rules. And through that process, declarations should be made about any personal connection. That is clearly understood by everybody involved, or should be. But Kate, as to when their relationship started, I'm afraid I don't have that information.
But you acknowledge that that's all important.
Well, look, I think it's really important in public life that if there are connections, they should be declared. That's common in not just in public life, but in all walks of life. And I would expect that this would be no exception.
And what if there haven't been?
Well, I don't know, Kay. I mean...
well, you should know, Mr. Buckland. You can't just say, I don't know. I mean, the point is, if they were in a relationship and we were paying 15 grand a year for him to have his mistress at the office, that's not acceptable.
No. If declarations weren't made, then clearly that is highly irregular and inappropriate. But what I was saying was that, trying to answer your questions about the fact, I don't know precisely when the relationship began, but what I would expect is that, if there are connections, they should be declared. And is that declarations should be made if indeed there was that degree of connection at the time.
Understood. Using a private email address to conduct government business, basically doing it in secret, that's against the rules, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we should use government emails. I think that's very clear. I think that even if other emails were used, perhaps in an emergency or in a rush, then there should be a way of collating that information should it be needed in future. I think it's much simpler to just use the government system, and then everybody knows where the data is stored. But as I said, sometimes in an emergency, perhaps another email address has to be used if a device isn't to hand. But the key there is retention and making sure that that information is available for anybody else to look at if there was further scrutiny.
So what's your view on the fact that that's not what the former Health Secretary did?
Again, I think the Cabinet Office, if they're asked to look at this, they probably will be, will need to satisfy themselves that if that was the case, then the material is available. I think it's really important, not just from a historical point of view, but from a public accountability point of view, that all data appropriately disclosable is available. And that's why I think it's wise to use government systems so that that material is much more easily retrievable.
And foolhardy not to.
Well, we went through some pretty extraordinary times, Kay. I mean, there were emergency situations that had to be dealt with very readily and very quickly. And sometimes, if a device isn't to hand, then a message has to be conveyed speedily. I think the important thing is that if that is done, then attention must be drawn to the need to make sure that that information is in a retrievable form.
Would you do it, sir?
Well, look, I use government email. I use government systems. I always use due process. I think it's important that we do that. It just makes my life easier, and it makes the lives of those around me much easier.
Have you ever used a private email for government business? Have you ever used a private email for government business?
No, I haven't. No.
Understood. How should the CCTV breach be investigated in your opinion? We heard yesterday from Jeremy Hunt. He said that potentially it's a breach of what was the phrase that he used? Official Secrets Act.
Well, look, I think that there is an important principle here about the need for ministers and indeed civil servants who often are handling very sensitive material and information to have a safe space within which to work. Now, I accept that CCTV is a factor of all our daily lives. We're probably being filmed in all sorts of places as we go about our lawful business. But I do think that there is a wider issue here of concern that we should all satisfy ourselves about, that there isn't inappropriate coverage being taken of sensitive matters that could be used in a way by those who wish us ill, other unfriendly governments or other people who do not have the interests of our country at heart. And that's why I think Jeremy is right to raise these issues. The specific case, I mean, I think it'd be rather wrong of me to comment as to whether it would have been a breach of official secrets. I think that clearly a general principle it has been raised here, but that's not to say that suddenly, we should, ministers should retreat into a secret world. I think that would be inappropriate as well. We're public figures and we're accountable to the public.
Should the police be investigating?
Well, for them, I don't know whether a complaint is made to the police. Clearly, this was a system that was a closed-circuit television system, presumably used for security purposes. And we all, I think, are very familiar with data protection and the dangers of sharing information without authorization and for purposes that are unconnected for the gathering of that data. All these issues are swirling about this morning. And if the police are asked to investigate, I'm sure they will.
Do you think they should? I'm sorry, we just missed the top of your answer there. Forgive me, sir, because we had a problem with the sound. Did you say they should investigate or they shouldn't, the police?
No, what I said is that if they're asked to, then of course they should. But it'll be very much subject to any complaint being made to them.
Do you have a CCTV in your office?
Well, I've asked that question. I don't think so. I've never seen any camera facilities. I know there's CCTV in the building for obvious security reasons, but I'm sure that many of my colleagues will be asking the same question and making sure that the offices are swept, just in case there are unauthorised devices in there that could be a national security breach. I think that's the sensible thing to do.
When did you ask?
I asked on Friday, so I expect to have those answers later today.
Okay, so you don't know yet. Yeah, I mean, it's almost unbelievable that that cabinet ministers don't have regular sweeps of their office.
Well, look, I mean, I think all of us make a reasonable assumption that we're, they're working away and that we're in a secure environment, bearing in mind all the safety measures that are taken in order to protect our buildings. But Kay, you raised a really legitimate question, and I think, frankly, sweeps should be conducted regularly, particularly where sensitive material is being handled. I mean, I don't know about other departments, but I can think of other departments where sensitive and often secret material is handled as a matter of course. If that material ever comes into my department, we have a special place where that is viewed. So I can assure viewers that we have very sophisticated and sensible security measures in place so that those documents don't fall into the wrong hands and that they can't be seen by people who are not authorised to do so.
As Secretary of State for Justice, speaking to the Prime Minister, which I'm sure you have done, he must be saying we need to do these regular sweeps from now on, given what we saw on Friday morning.
Well, I think all of us individually as Cabinet Ministers are asking the right questions, and no doubt we will get further advice on this matter. I'm certainly taking, I think, the necessary action. But in any event, I wanted to reassure everybody that, I don't play fast and loose with documents. We're very careful in the department about that.
Okay.
Because I'm very mindful of the sensitive nature of some of the material that I have to do.
Very quickly, just before I let you go, Chief Inspector of Probation says unifying of the probation service is what you are looking to push this morning. Is it essentially fixing Chris Grayling's mess?
Well, look, I think there were some good aspects of the work that was done in the last 7 years. There were some really excellent organisations involved in the supervision of offenders. But I think that bringing together the service in the way that we've done this morning with 200 million of investment, we've got 1,000 new probation officers coming online, 1,500 in the next year, really focuses the need to cut crime. And I look forward to seeing the work of probation officers later this morning who monitor offenders, work with the police, and are dedicated to stopping the cycle of criminality that is so depressingly familiar to many of us and which, of course, creates more victims of crime. I'm excited by the reforms that I've steered through, and I look forward to successful times ahead for our dedicated probation officers.
OK, Justice Secretary, I know you must flee. It's a pleasure to speak to you, as I said. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. Germany and France will today push for an EU-wide 2-week quarantine for people entering from countries of concern, including ours. It comes as Portugal imposes a 14-day isolation for British tourists who can't prove that they are fully vaccinated. Ryanair's chief exec was on the programme actually on Friday, and he questioned why fully vaccinated people faced any travel restrictions at all.
There should be no restrictions on those people going to Europe, and equally no restrictions on European visitors coming to London and the UK if they're fully vaccinated. They're not a risk, they're not a threat. And I think it would also undermine Mrs. Merkel's somewhat stupid idea this week that somehow British arrivals into Germany should isolate for 5 days. Why?
Well, our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons joining us now from Brussels. Hello to you, Adam. They're starting to circle the wagons against UK visitors, aren't they?
I don't know if they're that obsessed, frankly, with UK visitors. The bottom line is that the UK is not in the EU, it's not in the Schengen movement area, and countries like Germany and France, particularly I think the Germans, say, look, these are the rules for the rest of the world. The UK is no great exception to that. Yes, they have a lot of tourists coming into the EU, but frankly, if we're going to have a set of rules, we have to apply them to everybody. And so they're saying the rules for the UK should be the same as they were if you were coming from America or China or anywhere else, and that will mean quarantine. Now, Portugal, very popular tourist destination, has just put in its own quarantine, 14 days for people who are not fully vaccinated. There is a significant difference between those who are fully vaccinated and those who are not. And the rest of the EU is being encouraged to come into line behind that. And at the moment, it's a bit fragmented. Spain, Greece, Malta, Cyprus all have exemptions for UK tourists. And one of the reasons the Germans are nervous is that they think that if people with the Delta variant or susceptible to that get into the EU, they're then free to move around. Never underestimate the nervousness there is here about the high rates of Delta that they see in the UK.
OK, thank you. Let me tell you about a number of military top brass. They are isolating this morning. Becky Cottrell joining us from the newsroom. Hi, Becky, what happened?
Well, this all centres around a meeting with the head of the armed forces, General Sir Nick Carter, and the Defence Secretary and Britain's most senior military commanders last week on Thursday. It was at the Defence Academy in Oxfordshire. Now, a day later, General Sir Nick Carter tested positive for COVID-19. It was after attending a cultural festival in Wiltshire. It was a routine COVID test, and it meant that the Secretary of State and the heads of the Royal Navy, the RAF and Strategic Command were contacted by the NHS Test and Trace app and told to isolate for 10 days. Now, although their meeting with the Chief of the Defence Staff is classed as close contact, officials say that social distancing protocols were followed. Now, military business will be conducted remotely for the next few days, and that will be disruptive, not least because there will be highly classified, sensitive information that they are unlikely to discuss via virtual platforms at home because they won't be deemed secure enough.
OK, for now, thank you. Thanks a lot, Becky. US Navy has completed the first scheduled event of full ship shock trials on its newest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford. Wow. Can you imagine that being so close to where you're actually sitting in the middle of the sea? What if it didn't work properly? Goodness. Live explosions test the ability of the ship to deal with battle conditions before its full deployment. Thankfully, as you can see, all went well. Still to come on the programme for you. Security concerns in Whitehall over how that footage of Matt Hancock came to be recorded and leaked to the press. We'll speak to an expert who used to advise on the Prime Minister's safety at 7:30. Scientists identify more than 1,500 star systems where aliens could be looking back at Earth. We'll be speaking to UFO investigator Malcolm Robinson at 7:45. This matter is not closed. Labour calls for a full-scale investigation into Matt Hancock's conduct in office after reports he used his private email to conduct government business. We'll speak to the party's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, at 8:10. Now, Wimbledon gets underway today, but home fans have already suffered a blow after British #1 Johanna Konta withdrew from the tournament after one of her team tested positive for COVID-19. How frustrating. Our sports presenter, Jackie Baltrao, is at the All England Club for us. Hello to you, Jackie. Good morning. Oh, what a blow for her.
Yeah, absolute blow for Jo. She's been playing really well and she won a tournament in Nottingham last week, so she was all set for the grass. But, you know, the players know the risks of playing in this environment. Normally, they would all stay in houses around here that they would rent off local people. But this time, it's a very strict player bubble. They're all in the same hotel in Westminster and they're allowed to take 3 people in with them. So she'd picked her fiancé and 2 support coaches. So one of them has obviously tested positive and she has now got to go and self-isolate for 10 days. And luckily she lives quite near that hotel, so they've allowed her to go home. But, you know, for the rest of them, it's sort of like Wimbledon as we know it, with a few COVID tweaks. So when they go through that gate behind me today, there will be 50% capacity. Everyone that turns up will already have a ticket. There's no queuing. They've already bought their ticket and they have to go in and show that they have a proof with a certificate of either a double vaccination, proof of antibodies or a negative test with a certificate. So they've had to jump through a few hoops just to go and watch the players, as have the players who want to play in it. They will start with 50% capacity, which is about 21,000 people through the gates today, and that will rise, they hope, as the tournament goes on, because it's part of a government test event to see what happens when they get a lot of people together. And they're very much hoping that by semi-finals and finals weekend, they will be at full capacity for centre court, which is 15,000. And once you get into your seat, even though you've got to wear a mask when you're walking around the campus, when you sit down in your seat, you can take your mask off. There isn't any social distancing, or if you go to any of the restaurants, you don't have to wear a mask. What they weren't clear on was if Henman Hill is open. They said it would be. I don't know if they've done socially distanced picnic blankets or what they've done, but it is open. It will be socially distanced. It is Wimbledon back after 2 years, but as I said, with a few tweaks.
OK, Jackie, thank you. We'll find out what the weather's doing for Wimbledon in a short time. But first, police currently looking for a spectator who caused a crash at this year's Tour de France before leaving the scene. My goodness, that's what it looked like. The woman held a cardboard sign on the side of the course, which caused German rider Tony Martin to lose control, leading to a subsequent pile-up. It claimed legal proceedings planned to be launched against the suspect. I want to take you to Miami now. Families hoping for news of loved ones after an apartment block collapsed in Miami have been asking authorities whether a sinkhole was to blame. Frustrations evident at a community meeting. 9 people are now known to have died in the collapse. More than 150 remain unaccounted for. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports now from Surfside area of Miami, where the building was located.
There's little solace to be found in a tragedy like this. But in the temple British woman Bhavna Patel calls her second home, there is at least togetherness. Mother-in-law Pratima prays for a miracle that Bhavna, American husband Vishal and 1-year-old Aishani, who were on the 3rd floor of the tower, will be found alive. Bhavna is 4 months pregnant. If the collapse had been 2 days previously, she would have been here for a ritual ceremony. The lottery of circumstance is agonising.
They're very more than family to me. They're loved ones more than family, because they actually, live in this temple for a long time. I still cannot believe that they leave us, but we just have to have a very strong bond of the memory.
Families of the missing have been moved to this hotel. They're receiving regular updates from authorities, but those briefings are growing more tense by the day as the desperation intensifies. In one of these meetings, a woman whose sister is missing asks why there aren't more answers for her.
Was there a sinkhole under that first building, sir? I just want to know.
Ma'am, we're the fire department, we're first responders, we have no idea. That's the structural engineers, that's the building.
When you're down there, you mean to tell me you can't tell what's original parking lot and what may have caved down?
Families were taken on a convoy of buses to visit the collapse site. Underneath this debris, a trench has been dug, 125 feet long and 20 feet wide, to act as a fire break and allow better access. Rescue teams say, though, all power and telecommunications signals from the building are now gone. I realise this is a highly emotive issue, both for your men and women in the field and also for the families. Are you able to say when this search and rescue effort becomes a search and recovery operation?
No, at this time I'm not. Hope, and that's what I'm focusing on. So I'm going to continue that as much as possible. That's the driving message. That's what we're looking for.
It's a strange type of grief when there is no certainty. This is one family's way of coping. Across Miami and beyond, others are forging their own way through the heartache. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Florida.
150 still missing as a result of that building collapse in Miami. Of course, we will monitor that throughout the course of the day for you here on Sky News. Also watching for you today, first day of Wimbledon. What's the weather going to be like? Here's Jo. Morning, Jo.
Good morning to you. Well, unfortunately, the south is not enjoying the best of the weather at the moment. We've seen some really heavy rain overnight. So if you are travelling to Wimbledon today or anywhere at all, do be careful. There's a lot of standing water surface spray. And in fact, tomorrow we'll have the same issue with Wembley. Quite a few showers around. But let's take a look at the detail.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello, good morning to you. Well, it's this area of low pressure that is the culprit. Really, the rain just circulating round. And we've currently got some very wet conditions across parts of West Wales and the southwest. A warning out until 10 o'clock for that rain area. And then later on, we get a further warning for thunderstorms, some with hail, which will be working their way into southern parts of the country. So again, that could be a risk for Wimbledon this afternoon. So really, we've got three areas of weather. Up towards the north and the west, this is where we see the best of the weather. Temperatures around 22 or 23 degrees Celsius. Central areas looking rather gloomy with outbreaks of rain on and off throughout the day, and it's cool, 16 to 18. And then in the south, brighter with those thunderstorms.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, it might not look like a big crowd, but up to 2,000 people are thought to have attended an illegal rave in West Sussex. Party was shut down and over 50 arrests were made after police were called to fields near the town of Stenning in the early hours of Sunday morning. Under current coronavirus restrictions, gatherings may not exceed 30 people without a legal exemption. Now, the Justice Secretary has said he's asked for his office to be swept for any unauthorised devices following the leaked video of Matt Hancock kissing his aide, Gina Coladangelo. Robert Buckland said if such a device were found, it could be a national security breach.
I think, frankly, sweeps should be conducted regularly, particularly where sensitive material is being handled. I mean, I don't know about other departments, but I can think of other departments where sensitive and often secret material is handled as a matter of course. If that material ever comes into my department, we have a special place where that is viewed. So I can assure viewers that we have very sophisticated and sensible security measures in place so that those documents don't fall into the wrong hands and that they can't be seen by people who are not authorised to do so.
Well, Tamara is here. So he said, saw the paper on Friday, got his office swept.
Absolutely. Called up and said, have I got a camera in my office? And clearly there are a lot of unanswered questions still about this whole affair, about ministers not knowing that there are cameras in their offices, who has access to the footage from those cameras. We still don't know how it was leaked. There are big questions about that and the investigations to come. There are also big questions, as Robert Buckland conceded, about Matt Hancock's use of personal emails for departmental business, about the conditions under which Gina Coladangelo was employed. Was their relationship declared, or was it going at the time that she got that job back in September? Matt Hancock's resignation, despite being over social distancing guidelines ostensibly, doesn't shut down all these big questions. And of course, we're going to be hearing from the brand new Health Secretary today, only his second day in the job for Sajid Javid, updating us on when the Covid restrictions will be lifted. I understand it's pretty unlikely.
Just because Matt Hancock's resigned, though, doesn't mean that there aren't any questions still left to answer as far as his aide/mistress is concerned.
Absolutely. She was given a taxpayer-funded job in September, but has been working for him, it seems unofficially, for at least a couple of years now. And as Robert Buckland said, if they were in a personal relationship, he should have declared it. And we don't know when that relationship began. So a lot of questions there. And if she was hired properly, why did she give up her post at the weekend? So, yes, I think there is a lot more to come there. And none of that has been shut down. And we'll be hearing from Labour later, who definitely don't want these questions to be shut down.
Indeed. So for now, thanks so much indeed. Also hearing from Ed Davey, who is the leader of the Liberal Democrats. And as we're hearing there from Tamara, Angela Rayner will be joining us as well very shortly indeed. Before all of that, let's talk about security in more detail. Professor Michael Clark, Distinguished Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, is with us. Hello to Professor. Thanks for joining us on the programme today. What sort of questions would you be asking?
I'd be asking the first questions of the security company, or the company that services the DHSS. It's an American listed company called MCOR, and there's an MCOR UK who say on their website that they've had a contract since 2001 to provide lots of facilities to the Department of Health, including waste management and catering and security, fabrics and so on. And they cover all aspects of security, including, it would seem, CCTV. So the question is, this particular camera appears to have been in place since about 2017. So the first question is, did they put the camera there? And if so, who knew about it? And why was a camera placed in a minister's office? Because as somebody else has been saying, it isn't just to catch illicit kisses that one might have a camera in a minister's office. There are lots of documents being put around, left on tables. High definition cameras can read documents, as we've seen from people coming in and out of Downing Street. So my first set of questions would be the facilities company. And I think you can bet, they're not saying anything at the moment, but you can bet that Whitehall officials are descending on them, or have done in the last 2 or 3 days, with a fine-tooth comb. The other possibility is that the camera isn't part of the MCOR contract and was placed there illegally. And if that were the case, then I think you'd be looking at journalistic sources, probably.
Either way, does getting that information and giving it to a third party breach the Official Secrets Act, in your opinion?
It looks as if this doesn't at the moment, because this has been a camera capture and somebody has seen it legally or illegally and passed it on. As such, it's hard to say that what has been passed on is a matter of national security, and MI5 so far are saying that they may advise the investigation, but they're not now part of it, and nor at the moment is the Metropolitan Police. But if it turns out that this camera has captured other things, then it may well become a matter of national security. And certainly the government will be very concerned, as will most of the cabinet, at the idea that there are cameras in their offices. I think most cabinet ministers should assume that they're being watched all the time, every day, but they must also want to assume that their offices are swept and are private and are places where they can do business without fear of being watched.
But if there's a camera on the ceiling, you can see it, can't you, generally?
Not necessarily. This one was inside a fire alarm or a smoke alarm.
Allegedly. We don't know that.
Allegedly. As you know from your own computers, a camera aperture can be very, very small, just a little dot. And if it's part of 6 other dots, if it's the third one along in a row of 6, how would you necessarily spot it? Cameras can be hidden very, very efficiently.
Whatever the reason, the fact that it has been copied and given to a third party, does that mean a criminal investigation has the law been broken?
At the moment, that's not clear. That may turn out to be the case just on grounds of privacy. But I think that's a question probably for the end of the week, when people discover who owns this camera and who or what sort of people will have transferred the footage or given the footage to the newspaper. As I say, it doesn't sound like a national security issue at the moment, but it may turn out to be a privacy issue, certainly.
What about using private email addresses for government business? How vulnerable does that make a minister?
Very. They shouldn't do it. They all do it, or lots of them do it. The Americans do it. It's very tempting for a minister who is otherwise completely overseen by the civil service, and everything has to go on record. It's very tempting, particularly in a crisis or under pressure, to want to deal with your friends or people that you trust privately. When mobile phones first came out, and not many people had them, I know of at least 2 ministers who sat in their office with their mobile phone like a house brick on the desk so that they could speak to their private advisors without the civil service necessarily listening in. There's always a temptation to do it, and they shouldn't. And normally it's not a problem, but when it becomes a problem, it makes the minister look very foolish and very insecure.
Do you think that's how Matt Hancock looks this morning?
I'm afraid that the whole series of things, like so many issues, they unravel step by step. So the kiss, the extramarital affair, then, as it were, exposes the fact that he was not very secure in the way that he conducted his communications. Then it goes back on contracts that he may have given without due process. The whole thing goes step by step by step, and none of it is good for his reputation, nor for the reputation of the government, which is already being made to look by the opposition like a pretty careless government that really doesn't think about the procedures, doesn't really stick to the rules, doesn't see why it should.
Although I remember Labour losing a couple of CDs with, I think, many hundreds of thousands of pieces of information, private information from people. And I think that was from the Foreign Office, wasn't it, at the time? Or was it from the Treasury?
Yeah, it happens with depressing regularity. And in these days, there is so much information in circulation on so many different platforms that it will tend to happen. But that's a reason for ministers and government to be even more tight than they were 10 and 20 years ago, not about as tight as they were. These things will continue to happen, but they are damaging. And we hope that this one is only a matter of, as it were, private embarrassment. It doesn't go any further into the national fabric. But I fear that when we find out more about this surveillance issue, it may turn out that there's a great deal more things leaking than we thought would be acceptable.
OK, Professor, good to talk to you. Thanks for your expertise. Appreciate it. Looking at how this morning's newspapers are covering the story for you today, let's start with the Metro. Hancock clinch is reported to police. The headline in the Metro, as bereaved families call for him to be prosecuted for his breach of Covid rules. The Mirror, not holding back. Disgusting, the headline there. PM still has big questions to answer over Hancock, says The Guardian. And in the Eye, calling to review security across Whitehall after the leaked video of Matt Hancock embracing his aide. Let's return to the former Health Secretary's constituency. How has this affair gone down with voters there? Joined now by the editor of the East Anglian Daily Times and Ipswich Star, and that's Brad Jones. Hello to you, Brad. It's great to see you this morning. Always fabulous to talk to a fellow journalist. Talk to me about how this resignation and affair has played out in the constituency.
Morning. Well, we can only go by the people we've spoken to, the response we've had from our Suffolk readers to our coverage of the story over the last 3 days. And it is overwhelmingly that Matt Hancock's position was completely untenable. Now, when this story broke on Friday, the majority of the people we spoke to in the constituency said he should either resign or be sacked. And initially, at least, that clearly didn't happen. And people felt that way for all the reasons we've now all heard. They felt he had displayed complete hypocrisy by breaking the very rules that he had asked everybody else to follow for the last 15 months. But then over the weekend, we saw readers increasingly question why Mr. Hancock wasn't sacked by the Prime Minister. And that's actually what we've said in our leader column today, that we believe that's what the PM should have done. The public wants honesty, integrity and competency from politicians as a minimum. And too often we're not getting that. And the other thing we noticed over the weekend was there was in the constituency, there was not a sense of local supporters rushing to stand up for Matt Hancock. We tried to speak to lots of other senior Conservatives in the county, but very, very few were actually picking up the phone. One who did was Waveney MP Peter Alders, fellow Conservative, and he said that he felt that Matt Hancock was right to resign, agreed his position had become untenable, and said he'd received lots of emails from upset constituents. So that kind of gives a feeling for how it's played out here. There was also quite a lot of speculation yesterday about the local constituency party and a suggestion they were so angry about what had happened with Matt Hancock that he may even be facing deselection at the next election. Now, again, 3 days on, West Suffolk Conservatives are still to make any official comment on this story. We did speak to the Deputy Chairman very, very briefly yesterday, and he says he didn't know where that line had come from, but we don't know their official position. So that maybe they're still waiting to see how this plays out in the next few days, because as you said earlier, there are still many questions to be answered.
Do your readers give you the impression that their MP has got a future in politics, though, or not?
It's really hard to say at the moment. I mean, Matt Hancock he's in a really safe Tory seat. Since he was elected in 2010, he's increased his share of the vote every single election. Some of the people we spoke to yesterday said this is going to put a lot of people off voting for him, and I expect it will. It's going to be really interesting to see how the public reacts to this in his constituency over the kind of mid to long term, if, you know, that assuming that West Suffolk Conservatives do stand by him.
Okay. It's good to talk to you. Keep in touch. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. We are hoping to take you to Sydney shortly, where Sydneyans, is that what people are called? Sydney-siders? Sydney people from Sydney? Anyway, Sydney-siders, there we go, are waking up to another lockdown of 2 weeks. Tell you about that very shortly indeed. But first, scientists have identified 1,715 star systems, they've counted them, where aliens could have discovered Earth by observing our planet's transit. The research published in the journal Nature found that 75 of those stars came close enough to listen in to our radio broadcasts. Hopefully they were watching Sky. Joined now by Scottish UFO investigator and paranormal researcher Malcolm Robinson. Hello to you. It's great to see you again. 1,715 star systems where aliens might be. 29 planets picking up our radio broadcasts. Do we run and hide?
Well, like I said before, planet Earth is but a tiny grain of sand on a huge cosmic beach. And it's incomprehensible to think we stand alone in the vastness of the cosmos. We've been sending out radio and television signals since the dawn of time. Well, effectively, you know, since the invention of these devices, one of which was, of course, invented by a Scotsman, John Logie Baird. But it's like a party, Kate. It's like a party. The noise is coming out of a house, and we have who we have invited in our house. But hearing the noise of this party are uninvited visitors, gate crashers, if you like. So the insinuation here is that we have to be very, very careful who we let into our house, and our house being planet Earth. When we remember that Orson Welles' novel, War of the Worlds, came out in 1838, and H.G. Wells' play came out in 1938. Now, when that came out and went across many parts of America, many people who tuned in late thought it was a real deal, you know, thought it was something real happening in planet Earth, and there was chaos, absolute chaos throughout parts of America. Indeed, some people even committed suicide. So we have to be very, very careful about what we are sending out and what we get back.
No one would have believed. If you know, you know. Will we know in our lifetimes whether there are aliens?
Well, I would like to think so. I mean, there's no denying, as I said in a previous programme with UK, that we are seeing many craft in our skies which are beyond explanation. They defy gravity, they defy physics, etc. They've been seen over missile silos, they've been reported by military pilots, etc. So we do have something substantial in flying in the skies of this planet. Will it be answered in our lifetime? Well, I like to think so. I mean, you're looking at some footage from the USS Nimitz, which was shot of a strange object flying in the sky back in 2004. Very unusual objects. These defy explanation at this moment in time. But there's no denying, Kate, absolutely no denying, that we have a UFO presence here on planet Earth. Now, it's great that the scientists have found these 29 planets, which allegedly can pick up our radio broadcasts, our TV broadcasts. But it's like what I said before, you know, we have to be very careful who we are inviting into our house. You know, would it change religion? Do we have one God, or do we have a plethora of gods out there? We're sending our own probes out to Mars, the Mars rover, etc. Maybe what we see in the skies are probes from other planets. It's all debatable. You know, people have their own ideas as to what's going on right now. But it's fantastic that the scientists have confirmed that they are indeed habitable planets of a description out there that may be receiving our signals. But is it a life form like ours? You know, it depends on the planet. I mean, here on planet Earth, we have our satellite moon. If that was further away, planet Earth would probably not survive. We have the sun to give us warmth, etc. So any habitable planet out there in the vastness of the cosmos would need to have those same conditions. the satellite moon and a star to make life evolve. It might be microscopic life out there, but one thing's for sure, I don't think we stand alone in the vastness of the cosmos.
Well, or could it be like your Nessie keyring up there on the bookshelf and a complete myth?
Well, who knows? You know, I mean, Nessie, I love Nessie. I've been up to Loch Ness many times. I've been very fortunate to have went down in a submarine in Loch Ness looking for Nessie back in 1994. Nessie's an entirely different subject, but I do believe we have something very real, very large, and sonar is the best evidence to suggest we have Nessie in Loch Ness.
Fantastic. Great to talk to you again. Come back and speak to us soon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. So 29 planets can pick up radio broadcasts and TV broadcasts from the Earth. Very good morning to you, whichever planet you're watching from today. Let's take you to Sydney, waking up in another lockdown today.
Now, whilst the numbers today are less than the numbers yesterday, we have to be prepared for the numbers to bounce around, and we also have to be prepared for the numbers to go up considerably, because as experience shows with this strain, we are seeing almost 100% of transmission within households, and we're seeing a very high rate of transmissibility.
Pretty alien news for lots of Aussies this morning. Sky News Australia reporter Charlotte Mortlock joining us from Sydney. Not what people wanted to hear, is it? Good morning.
No, certainly not what Sydneysiders were hoping for, certainly considering how well we did last year throughout this pandemic. You can see right now I'm at the iconic Sydney Opera House and it is very eerie. There's hardly anyone around the CBD, and that's because we are in lockdown. That was initiated on Friday, so we've been about 3 days through and it is set to end in 14 days. We are very hopeful that will be the case. Today was good news. We saw 18 new cases. That is down from yesterday's 30. So fingers crossed we do see that downwards trend continuing, but our authorities are saying that because this Delta strain is so strong and so transmissible, we're seeing around 100% of the household contacts becoming infected. That's up from 30% on what we have seen on previous strains. So over the next few days, we will start to see the infected people transmitting that to their household contacts, and then we'll get a better gauge on if we are likely to come out of this lockdown on the 9th of July. Certainly, it has been a real roller coaster here in Australia, because we did so well last year with a very small amount of deaths in comparison to what we have seen overseas. But this year we are seeing a lot of frustration from Australian residents over the slow vaccine rollout. In New South Wales, the Premier Gladys Berejiklian says that we will be able to avoid potentially going into lockdowns and having restrictions when there are outbreaks when we see 80% of the adult population vaccinated. Now, the magic number we're aiming for there is 10 million vaccinations. At this stage, we're at 2 million, so we do have quite a bit of a way to go.
OK, good to talk to you. Thank you. Keep well. Thank you. First day of Wimbledon today, which could only mean one thing, can't it, Joe?
Yeah, probably lots of rain. And in fact, we've got some very wet conditions for southern parts of the country. Not just today, we've had wet weather over the weekend, and it's not looking to improve too quickly this week either. Meanwhile, the far north and west are having a lovely time. Let's take a look.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello, good morning to you. Well, over the weekend, we've seen this area of low pressure develop, and that's been churning rain around. And we've got some very heavy rain this morning over parts of Wales and the southwest. And we've seen lots of wet weather overnight as well. So pretty unpleasant driving conditions, a lot of surface water, standing water and surface spray. And we'll continue to see that through the course of the day as this area of rain starts to edge its way northwards. As things brighten up in the far south, we'll find temperatures rising, and as that happens, we'll see a lot of heavy thundery showers developing as well along southernmost coast. So further wet weather to come, top temperatures probably around 23, 24 degrees Celsius. The better weather is over parts of Scotland, parts of Ireland as well. As we get through this evening and overnight, turning chilly here, staying rather gloomy through central parts, and further heavy rain to come down in the south.